Where's your brother live at now?
Can you see?
I can see one.
There's a thumbs up.
Yes. Good morning. This is a call to order for the Buncombe County Planning Board on February the 16th, 2026 at 9:31 a.m. And we'll begin with a few announcements. Today, we will have one opportunity for public comment at our general public comment period after the approval of the minutes. And this comment period is to, or for the benefit of anyone wishing to bring any issue to the board's attention. If you wish to speak during this time, be sure you have signed up to do so on the sheets that are beside the door for that purpose. And each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And since we will not be taking a vote today, I will not need to read the review of conflict of interest statute, and we can move on to any staff announcements.
Thank you, Chair, Planning Board members, members of the public. So today's purpose is for Angela Lee, the floodplain administrator, to go over the flood ordinance text amendment. This is phase one. These are life safety changes in the floodway specifically. With today, we hope to advance this to an actual public meeting at our next meeting in March, if that pleases the board. And with that being said, if you're ready, she can go ahead and run you through the presentation.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is
Do we need to
Angela.
do roll call
Oh.
first?
Oh.
Or
Oh, yeah, and the agenda and all that stuff.
the agenda and minutes?
Whoops.
Somebody's in a hurry.
Nate's ready to move on.
Yeah.
Okay. We will have the roll call of board members, and we'll start on the end and move down this way.
Jay Marino. Carl Kuhn.
Nancy Waldrop,
Tim Collins.
Alan Carthy.
Eric Robinson.
thank you. And now we need to approve the agenda for today.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then we will move on to the planning board meeting approval for December the 15th. And we're going back to December because in January we weren't here due to the weather. So do I have a motion for that?
Move to approve minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Then now we're ready for our to open our general public comment period. Are there any speakers this morning for that? Okay. Then Dee Dee, you know the routine.
My name is Dee Dee Stiles, and I live in Swannanoa. I want to talk about this big rock. It's in the woods behind my house. A lot of the rocks that I see in that area, or down below that area, I know they're, because I've lived there for a long time and tried to move a lot of rocks. I know when I look at them, they're almost entirely covered by the forest earth. But I'm sure they're pretty big. But a little bit above that, there's a really big one that's sitting out on top of the ground, and it's not covered up. And the thing I know about that rock is that a long, long time ago, I have no idea how long it's been sitting there, but not for eons. It's not that been sitting there that long. And it could have, there's a good possibility that it used to be sitting in a place. It came from a place that is above where the top of the mountains are now. The mountains are constantly changing. They're constantly tumbling down and moving down and down toward the river. And one of the things we learned very clearly during Helene is that happens in some really big ways. It's not just a little trickle here and a little trickle there, but that big rock came from somewhere up high and rolled down the mountain. And it worries me that now it's a year and a half on from Helene, and I haven't, and I come to these meetings, I haven't seen, now we're working on the floodway, and that's extremely important. But I worry about, because while we're working on the floodway, while we're sitting here, they're digging on the mountain, building new houses and building new roads. And it seems to me like the need for better protection on the steep slopes is not being addressed in a timely enough fashion. There's people up there that are putting their houses in places that aren't going. Not only is the house not going to stay up there, the whole place is not going to stay up there. And so I would encourage the planning board, and maybe you're waiting for the county commissioners to tell you to do something. And in that case, I'll speak with the county commissioners, but I think there needs to be more strict regulations about the steep slopes, and think we need them sooner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee Dee. We appreciate your concern.
Thank you.
Any other public comment this morning? Then if not, we will close the public comment session and move on to the work session of ZPH 2026, the flood ordinance revisions.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Okay, I'll just talk about it. Morning, my name is Angela Lee. I am the floodplain administrator for Buncombe County. We'll be going over ZPH 2025-00042, which is the flood ordinance text amendment. Okay. So this presentation was done at the last meeting. We've got a printed version, so it's a little bit easier to follow along, and this time we do have it up on the screen. I'll go a little bit deeper into floodway because it seems like we had a few more questions in that realm as well. This is the overall agenda following the same presentation. So the purpose of the proposed text amendments will be to add clarifying definitions to the flood damage prevention ordinance and implement higher standards in the floodway. These standards are intended to expand the definition section, reduce construction in the floodway, and reduce temporary structures in the floodway. As Nate had mentioned before as well, this is the phase 1 of life-saving changes to the ordinance. So a quick overview of the NFIP program. Buncombe County joined the NFIP program and adopted the flood ordinance on August 1st of 1980. With this adoption of the flood ordinance, we've added restrictions to the 100-year floodplain, which we call the special flood hazard area, and is within the 1% chance of experiencing a flood of a base flood in any given year. The NFIP program is a FEMA-run federal program to provide flood insurance to property owners in participating communities, as well as hazard mitigation funds, by requiring communities to adopt floodplain management standards and to map flood hazards. The program aims to reduce flood damage and financial losses. The first amendment to the flood ordinance that we're looking at is to enhance the conveyance shadow definition. The conveyance shadow means an area upstream of or downstream of an existing obstruction to flood flows. Again, the conveyance shadow we're looking at to enhance is in the floodway. Currently, there is an allowance where the development can be limited to the hydraulic shadow of a building or other obstructions, such as an isolated area of high ground that was in existence at the time of the floodway that was designated. The NFIP program manual from FEMA states that this should only be done for small projects, such as building additions or accessory buildings. The conveyance shadow includes the areas immediately upstream and downstream, and the flood waters are already flowing around the existing obstruction so that the new development would not affect the existing flood flows. As you can see in the diagram, it's showing that the conveyance shadow is calculated around the existing house that is in play. Currently, building additions or small accessories built entirely within the conveyance shadow can be permitted without an engineering analysis needed for a NORAD certification. With this amendment, we are looking to restrict conveyance shadow development within the floodway with our ordinance.
One thing I want to make clear is already currently in the ordinance, it says no new habitable structures. So why would we want to encourage bad behavior with allowing someone to do an addition in the floodway on an existing structure? We feel that is just misaligned, just the purpose of trying to clean this up.
Does that preclude building up?
So what this means is you're actually increasing a footprint
Okay.
of the floodway, not necessarily building up.
And the text amendment would just prohibit construction in the conveyance shadow.
Yes.
In the floodway, yes.
What we're trying to do is really discourage everything in the floodway, as we all know, for obvious reasons. It's just not smart to have homes in the floodway.
The next definition change that we're looking to make in the flood ordinance is the repetitive loss definition. This is not currently clarified in our ordinance currently, so we just want to add this definition. It is part of the NFIP program already that we have adopted. It's just not fully spelled out in our ordinance. Repetitive loss means a building has submitted and received 2 or more separate claim payments where the total exceeds the property value, or has had 4 or more claims of $5,000 or more since 1978. The reason why we want this clarified in our ordinance as well is due to Helene and with Tropical Storm Fred, we are having structures that have repetitive loss. There's a couple structures that are going through this repetitive loss. It does allow the community to also have different means through FEMA, but it gives our program a clearer definition on how we are going to start tracking the repetitive loss as well.
Does this definition talk about only those claims that are caused by flood or water damage, or does it talk about any claim?
It's
Just flood related.
flood hazard claim, yes.
Okay, because it doesn't really clarify that.
Yeah, but this is specific to our membership in the National Flood Insurance Program for flood policy holders. So it's only that flood policy. It wouldn't be like fire or something your homeowner's insurance would cover.
Okay, so just flood policy.
That's
Flood
correct.
policy, correct.
Okay.
And again, this is already covered in the NFIP program. We do enforce this already. It's just not fully spelled out in our ordinance, so we wanted to add some more clarification into our ordinance. The letter of map change definition, again, this is similar in the sense that it is something that we follow with the NFIP program and with FEMA. It is something that we already regulate, but it is not fully spelled out in our ordinance, so we like to add this to the flood ordinance. The letter of map change, or the LOMC, is an official determination used by FEMA that amends, revises an effective flood insurance rate map or flood insurance study. So this is all done processed through our office and then through FEMA, approved through FEMA and brought back. We're just clarifying the definitions. And then there is an addition to C under the letter of map revision based off fill. This is specific to Buncombe County. Buncombe County has adopted a higher standard. We regulate to 2 feet above base flood elevation. We would like to add clarification to our ordinance stating that if you fill, it must meet our Buncombe County specific standard. So again, this is just clarification added to the flood ordinance on something we are regulating.
What was happening is you would get somebody that places fill in the 100 year, and they, before they even build a structure, they put their fill to the base flood elevation. But when you do that and you submit a letter of map change, that removes you from the regulated floodplain. But we have a higher standard. You're at the base flood elevation with your fill. So all this is saying is, no, you need to put 2 more feet of fill to meet our freeboard requirements. We adopted a higher standard. We went through this with the state. We need to be clear in the ordinance on what it means. That's what this does.
That's what BFE stands for, base flood
Base
elevation.
flood elevation. And then the freeboard is whatever you have on top of that. And then What you have on top of that then gets you to what's called the regulatory flood elevation.
So this definition, kind of like the examples that Nate had mentioned, was confusing some of the applicants to where FEMA would allow fill to a certain elevation, but Buncombe County, because we've adopted a higher ordinance, we still restrict for 2 feet above that level. So it's clarifying you must meet our local ordinance first. The substantial improvement definition, the font in black is already in our current ordinance. We are looking to add some clarification again to this definition. Substantial improvement is any combination of repairs, reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvement of a structure taking place during any 1 year period for the cost that equals or exceeds 50% of the market value. The allowance of a variance to this substantial improvement definition includes A and B. And for Buncombe County, we are looking to clarify that if this is a historic structure variance for substantial improvement, that they must adhere to our Buncombe County variance procedure. Again, clarification to an already existing ordinance to state that you must meet our Buncombe County standards.
And quite frankly, the only time you should ever issue a variance to your flood ordinance is for a historic structure. The picture there is actually on the Biltmore Estate. That is the only time I can remember in county history where we've actually issued a variance. It's on the National Registry. Angela, what's it called? This one's the.
It's the Biltmore Cottage.
Just for my information, let's say all the buildings in Biltmore that are reopening, have they been ordered to make adjustments to their flood plan, or how are they being insured, or are they just not being insured, or?
Okay, so let's be clear on this. This particular structure right here is actually in unincorporated Buncombe County, whereas all the structures, say in Biltmore Village or in the city of Asheville.
Okay.
The city of Asheville is its own separate member,
Right.
but a lot of their standards are the same. So if they were damaged beyond 50%, that's what's called substantial damage, or if it's improved beyond 50% of the market value, that's what's called substantial improvement. They should essentially be following the same process, but their ordinance it's going to have slight variations from what our ordinance might have. And that's pretty typical amongst the different communities. You might have some slight variations, but a lot of the flood ordinances in North Carolina, for the majority of the ordinance, it follows the state model ordinance. And this is replicated also across the United States, but you'll find differences in different communities. So I can't really speak exactly to the ones in Biltmore Village.
So this is, even though it's on the Biltmore Estate, is in the county.
Yes, it's the line is like right there at the,
Okay.
we have the gate across from McDonald's.
Right.
But everything towards the village is in the city.
Okay.
The actual estate and then the cottage as well as in Buncombe County.
Okay. Thank you.
So for this property specifically, the cottage, it was in Buncombe County's jurisdiction, and they were looking to make improvements after the damage, and it crossed the threshold of 50% into substantial improvement. Now, typically with substantial improvement, this structure being in the floodway, with Buncombe County's ordinance, we do not allow habitable structures in the floodway. They applied for a variance to this to then make all these changes to the cottage and have all these improvements while doing a variance to the ordinance. So for this definition improvement, what we're looking to clarify is that it is specific to this example of the structure being a historic structure, a designated historic structure that they have to continue through the variance procedure. It is not just a immediate allowance under this definition. It is that they still need to go through the variance procedure.
And the Board of Adjustment hears that, which they did, and they approved it a few months ago. Yeah.
And the value is either the tax value or you could have an appraisal done for the value.
Correct. Yes, yeah. So we'll initially use the tax value, but all applicants have the right to submit their own appraisal.
It gets a little tricky when you start talking about historic structures because those are sometimes hard to comp.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
you know, at the end of the day, the reason that you want to have a variance process for historic structures is that that's us. That's what we know. You know, it's one of those things you kind of want to preserve. And in this instance, it's not like someone lives here permanently. It's just a feature of the estate. Good.
The floodway. The floodway, or the non-encroachment area, includes the channel of a river or other watercourse and the adjacent land areas that may be reserved in order to pass the base flood discharge without increasing flood depths. Any project in a floodway must be reviewed by the local community's engineering or planning office to determine if the project will increase flood heights. So this area is the most restrictive in our ordinance. It will encompass both the waterway and an area outside of the stream or channel or the river to protect that area with any structures of development to occur. Computer models of the floodplain are used to simulate the encroachment or development in the flood fringe to protect where and how much the base flood elevation would increase if the floodplain is allowed to be developed. And the floodway will only increase the 1 foot surcharge. So that floodway is already calculated out and drawn for us on our maps provided by the state. That is what Buncombe County regulates on, is the floodway and the non-encroachment area. Again, this area has the highest level of protection due to the nature of the impacts with development. It's the most susceptible for damage during any hurricane event or storm event. Other changes that we're looking to make in the ordinance is in the specific standards. We're looking to clarify. Currently, the ordinance states temporary non-residential structures and materials are required to have an EAP, an emergency action plan, for all temporary structures and storage in the floodplain. We would like to clarify and remove the non-residential part of this ordinance to just clarify that all temporary structures and materials will require an emergency action plan. Essentially, we would like to see that there is some sort of plan for removing temporary items that are in the floodway and floodplain to remove those during a storm event.
Can you walk them through like an auto camp or like a Zen tubing so they understand what that means?
Yes. So for AutoCamp, for example, they have all the airstreams that are right off the river within the floodplain. What we would like to see on our end during the application portion is to have them create an emergency action plan. And that will, give me 1 second. I can pull up the what it requires is that they have a general plan or a layout for where they're going to place all of their airstreams. So when they receive an alert for a storm event, a hurricane, anything touching down, or a major flooding event, they have an action plan saying they're calling this towing company, and in this time frame, they are going to remove all those airstreams to higher ground outside of the floodplain. It is a requirement of our ordinance already. Again, the clarification is to state that it does not necessarily need to be non-residential. We're looking for all temporary structures and materials to have some sort of plan to be removed in that alert of an event. Essentially, we want to reduce as much obstruction that could happen to any downstream in any event, and to have the owners of this temporary structure to have ownership on when they're removing their structures. Let me give you an example of what it is.
Is this an example of an RV park where people rent spaces for like a year
Bingo.
Yes.
and they may not be there to remove their own camper? Is that kind of the fact pattern we're looking at?
AutoCamp specifically, I believe, only do short-term, like just vacation, like weekend or vacation rental short-term times. I don't think they allow anything longer, but
You rent
this
their,
would
you rent
encompass
their
all.
trail, you rent their airstream.
Yes, you rent their Airstream. It's like a vacation.
That's their
rental.
model,
Yes.
but yes, Alan,
Okay.
it does. And here's why this is so important. You got a well-built home, you built your house above freeboard. You did pretty good. The water came up, and all of a sudden, floating down the water comes a missile, whether it be
A
a
missile.
shed or an RV, crash.
A silver missile.
Silver missile. That's why it's so important, is because you could have done well during the flood, but the unintended consequence from upstream is you got hit by somebody else's piece of property.
Does this also kind of affect companies that say store trucks and trailers and U-Hauls and the like, which would be another example of a missile?
Yes, we're looking to have, and we're looking to have anyone that's going to store anything in the floodplain to at least have the thought of how they're going to have an emergency action plan in the event of a storm. There is an allowance to have temporary structures, and there is a 180-day time frame that they can have these structures. But in the event of flooding event, we want these owners to at least have a plan on how they're going to remove this during that time. So, for example, AutoCamp, they have an action plan for the people that are going to be in those airstreams. So anytime they get an alert for a storm or a flooding event, they have an action plan to get all the people out. But we want them to look at how do you get your structures out, because those are going to affect other downstream and bridges. And so we want them to have a plan for that as well. Again, this is already in the flood ordinance. We just want to clarify that it is not just for non-residential. We want them for all structures and materials.
And it also, there's another component to this. If it's something that can't be removed, if you have like a business and you have some cargo containers or you have a fuel tank, this also covers, you have the option to anchor. So that way it reduces the floatables.
So Carolina Concrete in Swananoa, they have to have a plan to move their gravel and sand, or?
If it is stored in the floodplain, we are looking to have them have an action plan for that. A lot of times they won't store the actual materials in the floodplain. This could also be discouraging to have your materials in the floodplain.
Well, a lot of those are older and existed well before.
So you can have a grandfathered use. This would be any new use. Okay.
So this definition change and clarification is not making it any stricter to have this materials or structure there. This is just encouraging that they have an emergency action plan. So they can still have the allowance of the materials and the structures there. We're just requiring that they now add a one sheet of an emergency action plan to show us that they have some sort of plan in play for a flooding event. And I'll read out what is currently on our ordinance for the temporary structures emergency action plan. I'm just going to say them real quick. This a specified time period for which the temporary use will be permitted, a name, address, and phone number of the individual responsible for the removal, a time frame prior to the event at which the structure will be removed, a copy of the contract or suitable instrument that the entity is responsible for the physical removal, and a designation accompanied by documentation of the location where it will be removed. It could all fit into one sheet. What we are doing is encouraging people who have these temporary structures in the floodplain to have a thought of where they're going to remove it during a flooding event.
And to your point, Carl, I think our main concern is I would much rather have a pile of sand and gravel than I would a shed or an RV. And sure, it's going to take a little bit of your sand and gravel away. Most business owners don't want to take the chance of losing product. It's not going to take the full pile of gravel and sand away, but really this is geared towards all the different things that are much more floatable, the tanks, the cargo containers, the RVs, the vehicles, all the floatables.
And with regard to like the cargo containers and say some business that purchased an old 55-foot trailer or whatever, how would you anchor those, just so I understand?
A lot of times they make the aircraft cable, and then you'll have the corkscrew long metal features that go into the ground. Seen concrete with heavy duty hooks. This isn't the easiest section of the ordinance to regulate. We have people in 667 square miles that put things everywhere every day. And I will tell you, and I'm sure Angela and Olivia will agree with me, it's kind of a code enforcement nightmare right now. We've got things everywhere. But this is just our best attempt to actually tighten up the ordinance and make it clear.
Do you tend to see emergency action plans where the plan is to remove a storage container, or is it more because they're not on wheels, more apt to be anchored?
Sure. So our ordinance with the NFIP, with the flood ordinance and the NFIP program, what they require is that if you are in the floodplain and you are going to be considered temporary, then you must be on wheels. You must be road ready. So either if they are planning on keeping it permanently there, then that's where the anchoring comes into play. You must fit the rest of our ordinance. These are specific to just if you're going to consider yourself a temporary structure, again, then it needs to be on wheels. So these are targeting more of the RVs and again, these commercial like RVs and trailer parks that are geared toward having just a temporary and not planning on being there permanently, that have an emergency action plan for their people, but maybe not so much for their structures. We want them to also just have one for their structures.
During
But
during the hurricane, we saw a lot of cargo containers going down the river and piled up against bridges. So this actually is addressing that as well, correct?
That part would address, actually our ordinance altogether would address that. If it is temporary, it should have only been there for 180 days. And the emergency action plan would address that they would have to have some sort of backup plan if they were already declaring to us that it was going to be there for less than 180 days.
This helps staff with code enforcement issues. This helps staff. So a lot of the illegal uses have now been cleared out. There were a lot of cargo containers in the city, that's for sure. We had quite a few in the county as well. And they all end up in the same place in the middle. But this helps us strengthen us as floodplain managers to help us if we do have to take action.
Yes.
Thank you for
Are
the answer.
the evacuation plans for residential areas, are they being required to make sort of some kind of early warning system?
That's different. Now, this is emergency action plan
Yeah.
for think of it as development. Evacuation plans are a whole different animal, and that has to deal more with our emergency services folks. The National Weather Service, that's a whole different beast.
This is just for the structures.
Okay, but what I'm saying is for the structures, for the owners, how will they be notified? Like, say if I have a structure
Right.
in a plane, how will you notify me that I need to get my equipment out of there?
So part of the emergency, so for AutoCamp, for example, they stated in their emergency action plan that they would follow the National Weather Service alerts. So when the National Weather Service declares a major storm event of a certain foot height, they chose 6.5 feet. That is when they will know to start removing their lower airstreams.
Let's
So
look at,
that's
say,
not for us to
yeah,
decide. It's
okay.
in their emergency action plan that they're letting us know when they are deciding to do it. Some folks decide they want to do it at the first alert of, let's see. So one of the examples that a lot of applicants use is a minimum of 72 hours before landfall of a hurricane or immediately upon flood warning notifications is when they will do it. Again, we won't decide and tell them when they need to remove them. It is the emergency action plan that the applicant is deciding, writing, and letting us know that's what they will do.
For the greater good of the rest of the people in the county that, if you have a house, you're not going to have an emergency action plan.
correct.
So that's when we're going to rely on our emergency services folks to make the call. Hey, big event here occurring in Swanano. We need to evacuate this section or that section. Or it's very complicated. It's actually much easier in a coastal situation, having worked in the Florida Keys.
Mhm.
First thing we always did when we had a imminent tropical storm or hurricane, the first thing you do is you get the tourists out. Get them out first, and then they start making a call for permanent residents and things like that. It's very different in a riverine setting because we can have East Buncombe that might experience a flash flood, Swanano going into Asheville, but not touch Hominy. Just like Fred. Hominy that didn't really affect so much East Buncombe. So that's where we really rely on our emergency services folks to make those kind of calls.
Well, I think what I'm trying to get at is like, let's say Camp Mystic in Florida, where it flooded
You
in
mean Texas?
Texas, yeah. And where no one got the word. My concern is that in areas that are populated or you have temporary airstreams, how will we make sure that the word is getting to those people to evaluate? Or does the owner's evacuation plan have checks and balances so that they're making sure that these people are getting the word, such as alarm systems or anything like
Yes
that?
and no, but I want to stay really far away from conflating the two because the two are very different. Example she's given is you have an RV park, you have people staying at your RV
Yeah.
park. The first part of that emergency action plan is everybody out.
Right.
But it doesn't cover like a broad spectrum of like, that was a terrible situation. I don't know what Texas's standards are. They're much different than ours. That was a riverine example, but I want to make sure and be very clear that our emergency action plan is definitely not a broad evacuation.
So I will say, if you look at the recovery plan, and I'm going to, I can't remember exactly what the proposal is, but there is a proposal, I think, in there for emergency alerts, and how to deal with that at the county as a whole. So you have to look in the plan for the exact plan. But that's the recovery.
They're asking for money. We lost a lot of stream gauges. You could do, to some extent, you can do a siren system, like tornadoes, if you've lived in an area where you've ever had a tornado. It's just really, really hard on such a broad area to cover everything. Let me give you an example. Y'all been to Linville Gorge?
Mhm.
We all know it's like this, right? It's got huge boulders all around it. They put siren systems in there because they get flash floods every single time. Water screams down the slope, so that's an example where they've instituted a siren system. But to Jillian's point, she is correct. There have been a number of asks. It's all about getting money to institute that kind of technology.
And one quick follow-up, is that evacuation plan something that comes before this board or before some other board?
Now,
What-
evacuation plans are fluid. They have more to do with coordination with the National Weather Service and our emergency services staff.
So we don't look at that.
You do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nathan, do you know off the top of your head, if I have a cargo container on my property and it floods and it floats off of my property and kills and destroys it, am I liable? Is the property owner liable for that once it leaves their property?
So we actually had any number of floatables that commingled with any number of tree stumps and any number of other things. I don't know the answer to that. And I would look to Alan, because in our litigious world that we're in, I'm sure anyone can make a claim about anything.
Right.
I don't know how it all plays out in the court system. But I certainly, if I owned a business and I had something that could be floatable, I don't want to lose it. I'm going to do everything I can to keep it on the property.
Sure.
Not my area, but a very interesting question, because we did have a lot of stuff come down the river, so, but I wouldn't know the answer.
I just think you could maybe tie it to a penalty section when people cheat.
Our goal here is to give us a little more clarity for code enforcement issues and when we permit these things to make it a little more clear for applicants.
Would we recommend that he have that container anchored?
I would recommend that you have the container anchored. The hard part for us as floodplain managers is, when did that cargo container first show up on his property? Was it in the special flood hazard area? The hardest thing about this storm is it was the 1,000-year event. I have a slide that I like to show that shows the Ingalls front door being 800 feet from the special flood hazard area, yet they still took 2 feet of water. So it took so many floatable things that weren't even in the special flood hazard area that I can't even regulate. And that's the hard part about a storm like this.
I also want to reiterate that the emergency action plan change that we're looking to make in the ordinance, the regulation is already there. We already require an emergency action plan from these commercial, like larger temporary structures in the special flood hazard area. We're just looking to clarify it because it was confusing some applicants on which qualifies as a non-residential and which doesn't qualify. So a lot of folks are saying, well, if we have people stay in there, does that not count? And so we wanted to just clarify, it's already there that they are required to do an emergency action plan. And again, it could be as simple as just a one sheet with some contacts on it. We're looking to clarify to say it's all temporary structures that are in the floodplain.
When we go to public meeting, what we'll do instead of this, probably the slideshow, we'll have the slideshow on deck, but we'll actually look at how these actually fit into the ordinance itself so we can read along, okay? And you guys can see, we use strike through and underline so you understand what was in the ordinance before, what we're adding, or what we're removing.
Speaking of floatable materials, that kind of segues into our other one of temporary storage in the floodway. So again, this is just focusing on the floodway. We're looking to have no new travel trailers or travel trailer parks that will be permitted to encroach into the floodway and non-encroachment areas. The other item is to have no temporary storage of floatable materials, including mulch, lumber, containers, or sheds, shall be permitted in the floodways and non-encroachment area. And the third, no temporary storage or junked vehicles or mechanized equipment shall be permitted in floodways and non-encroachment areas. So we're looking at focusing on that floodway, the area that is already highly restrictive, to then remove the allowance of temporary storage, such as storage containers, any of that, in the floodway.
And to be clear, fill is prohibited in the floodway anyway. This is just adding more clarity for us.
Yes. Okay, and this is the summary of the proposed text amendments. Again, as Nate mentioned, we'll have the actual text amendments printed out next time so you can see where the exact definitions are going to be enhanced and where they're going to be removed. We're adding the conveyance shadow definition, adding repetitive loss definition, adding the entire LOMC definition, and expanding on the Lomar F definition. We're expanding on the substantial improvement definition. No new development in the conveyance shadow. We're clarifying the temporary structures and materials for the EAP. No temporary storage of travel trailers, materials, and junked vehicles in the floodway.
Yeah, so this slide here, number 13, is just a kind of a preview of our eventual goal. Remember, this is a phased approach. We're eventually looking to join the community rating system by adopting higher standards. This will, which we already have. So we will get credit for some of the higher standards we already have, but eventually we need to join the program in order for that to translate to getting a discount if you're a flood policy holder in Buncombe County. So that's just a little bit of a preview of future things. And because you all asked, you are a part of that process. And
How much of a discount do you get?
it's tiered. So one of the gold standards in the United States is actually Charlotte-Mecklenburg. But that's for Charlotte-Mecklenburg. They have a lot of flat land, which we don't. And we need to tailor this and be very careful. We want to try to do no harm is our goal. We also know that we have a severe housing shortage. So there's a lot of things to work around. So we're going to be very careful. We can join a lower tier first and work our way to the top. But again, it's different for every community. Once we get to that point, we will show you all the different kind of benchmark communities in North Carolina. My next ask for you all is we would like to advance these changes to a public meeting next month, if that pleases the board.
Do you need a motion for that?
There you have it.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
We will see you in March for a public meeting and then take this probably to the commissioners in April.
And just to note for you guys, we're gonna start taking 911 trusted ordinance after this, continuing the sort of life safety and environmental. ordinances. We'll also have some more to do. Area plan process in March, and then either in April or May to bring policy actions.
I think it's important to realize that the National Flood Insurance Program, even though we're adopting all this, in most cases is not economically viable to buy that insurance, and it's capped at 500,000. And so it really doesn't provide much.
And if you want to ask your fellow floodplain administrators here what they think about that, we would absolutely agree. It needs a complete overhaul at the federal level. We are fortunate, though, that we can adopt higher standards on our own, because it's kind of up to us to do things that, Carl's point, if you do just the baseline, it is what it is. And if you lose your house based on a flood, it does not make you whole. But doing things like having a higher freeboard and keeping yourself elevated, and that speaks volumes.
The NFIP program also, in the case with Hurricane Helene, allows for FEMA to offer different grants for repair. So there is like the ICC, increased cost of compliance fund that comes through for structures that have been damaged within the special flood hazard area that were substantially damaged. Now that's specifically offered from FEMA to communities that participate in the NFIP program. So there are other hazard mitigation grant opportunities because we are a participating member. The biggest focus tends to be the insurance, because that is offered for kind of everybody out there. And we're not hoping for any disasters. We're looking at disaster funds that come with a major disaster like this. Tropical Storm Fred, there were also some individuals that qualified for some hazard mitigation grant money from FEMA, again, because we're a participating county in compliance with the NFIP program. So definitely insurance is a main focus, but there's a lot of other funds that come through for hazard mitigation by participating.
So do we need this for FEMA buyouts?
Let me explain that a little bit. That's part of the hazard mitigation plan. So we have a hazard mitigation plan. It identifies all the different hazards that we are susceptible to. That's currently in force. And the reason that we got a hazard mitigation grant program that came to town, to Carl's point, is we had one that's in force. Now we're starting the new plan because it comes in cycles. But what that means is, because we had a plan in force, we are currently in the process of the hazard mitigation grant program, which allows the following. They can come in and elevate your structure if you participate. This is all voluntary. They can demolish your home and build you a contractor grade home at the regulatory flood elevation, or the nuclear option, acquisition. And there are a number of acquisition properties coming our way. That is a bit of a long process. They're already starting elevating. They're already starting rebuilds. But the longer term thing is, and if you all remember, who was here for Carl? I know you're Jay. You're here for Francis and Ivan. Who else was here from it? Okay. So we had a small program then. That's where we got like Spirits on the River. We got some manufactured home parks on Old US 70 and Swannanoa. So we've done this before. The properties get deed restricted in perpetuity to the county or the city in which they're located, and then they become green space or open space. That's kind of how that program works. Where it's currently in play, it's going to take a long time. And I can't remember if in 2021, when we did the hazard mitigation plan, if I presented that to you all before we took it to the commissioners. Nancy, were you on the board in 21? Planning board?
Yes.
Do you remember?
No.
Well, you may see that plan, but anyway, if not, it'll go to the commissioners. But It's really basic. It just talks about landslide, wildfire, flood, pandemic, electromagnetic pulse, like crazy stuff. But
I do remember that.
yeah. So anyway, we're working on that. The kickoff was held recently. We just had another meeting. Angela, do you remember when we're supposed to be, that's going to go for adoption? Probably by July, maybe? Hazard mitigation plan.
I'm maybe a little later than July. We'll see. We'll see. It is in process though. I will say where the HMGP plan or the hazard mitigation plan and the HMGP, like the program, comes into play with the NFIP program that we participate in, is those projects that get adopted, those elevation projects, all of those need to be within a participating community because FEMA will send the grant money for that program and for those projects, but it's the local ordinance, it's the flood ordinance and the local community that will enforce where and follow along with the projects on how we're going to enforce it within the special flood hazard area. So the grant money does come in, but it's the local ordinance that holds it to a certain standard. So that's where HMGP and NFIP, us, Buncombe County being an NFIP participating community, crosses over. We need to be a participating community for them to have these projects here.
When all this goes before, or the next meeting when we approve whatever we're sending to the commissioners, does this stuff that we did, is this incorporated into what you're going to present, or
Yes.
how does all that work?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do at the next meeting, is we're going to have our slide deck here. We're going to have that document there. We're just going to go page by page and say, here's where we inserted this, here's where we changed this, just so it's clear to you all. And then that is the actual text that'll get uploaded to Civic Plus, used to be Municode, and then that becomes part of the new ordinance, which is a work in progress because remember, we're going to take this in chunks and phases.
Right. Well, there's one thing I'm confused about. Today, we kept talking about that our standard was 2 feet above the base, but in what we looked at last time,
Typo, we had a
3 feet.
couple of issues there.
Okay.
Ahead of ourselves a little bit. We need to correct that. So if you have an old document, please throw that out.
Okay. So it is 2 feet, not 3
We're
feet.
going to discuss why.
Okay.
And that has a lot to do with receiving the next round of flood insurance rate maps, which we're still a few years out on. We just want to be careful not to create a bunch of different standards because that will make our head hurt as flood managers and it'll confuse people. So
Right.
We're also right in the middle where some projects are going through this elevation change that with FEMA and with HMGP. And if we switch that height elevation right in the middle of while they're doing the projects, it could create a bit of, well, mine had to be increased 2 feet, mine had to be increased 3 feet because of a 1 day change. So we're looking to do these in phases to where this phase, the first phase, is prioritizing high risk areas like the floodway and doing life safety changes. The second phase will be geared more toward regulatory changes within the special flood hazard area to increase our standards as Buncombe County. And that's kind of where our initial thought was to add some elevation to it, but it better aligned with doing it in the second phase where we can have those changes to increase our standard and keep this phase just focused on life safety within the floodway.
Okay. Thank you. That I totally understand all that. I was just not able to comprehend why I was saying one thing here, but we were saying
Yeah,
something else today. So thank you.
Sorry, we had a lot going on.
We'll have a
I
different
understand.
version for you next time.
Is this updated or is this old?
Okay, so what I handed out today was just, that is just a copy of the existing ordinance.
Without the changes?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's just for reference. So you'll have kind of 3 documents. You'll have your existing ordinance, the slide deck, and then we'll bring the updated strike through guidelines, okay?
Kind of a quick follow-up on the flood insurance topic that was down on the other end of the table. Is the reason why it's not in full recovery for citizens because Congress hasn't put some kind of inflationary aspect into it to make sure it's covering
Oh, it's
the cost of
we could
structures?
talk for weeks about this, but yes, it all has to do, all of the insurance components of it are done at the federal level.
And they're
And
just not keeping up.
no, they're not. And Angela's got a book that's about this, it's about this thick. And one of the hardest sections of the certified floodplain manager test, which 1, 2, and Olivia also works. Olivia, I'm gonna say that. She's one of the floodplain managers as well. We've all taken the exam. It's a difficult exam, and one of the hardest sections is the insurance section.
Thank you. Get lots of questions from the public about that, so it helps to know what we're talking about.
And a lot of times, I have to kick them to the insurance agent on that. But you know, maybe down the road when we get into the meatier sections, we might even be able to bring an insurance rep to sort of explain.
Yeah, the state actually has a couple insurance reps that are making their rounds around Western North Carolina, I think because they are getting so many of these questions. On our end in our office, where we kind of hand it off is any of the documentation, any substantial damage documentation, any permitting documentation, that's what our office will provide. After that, it goes straight to the insurance companies, whichever they take over. But yes, the state, I think, has heard all of these too. And so they are making their rounds with some insurance reps for additional information.
Would love to hear from the insurance rep.
Yeah.
Would be good.
And that's all we have for you today.
Okay. Any further discussion about your questions?
I just looked it up. The natural hazard monitoring, talking about alerts, is on page 48 of the Buncombe County Recovery Plan. And I'll send you guys a link to the Buncombe County Recovery Plan. There's lots of interesting stuff in there and really valuable projects. A lot of them relate to our ordinances that you guys look at, to plans like this one, small area plans, but I encourage you to take a look at that plan.
Eric, one of the most interesting things that we're trying to do here, remember the conveyance shadow building in the shadow we talked
Yeah.
about earlier? There's your Camp Mystic example. But those are some of the things that were allowed that we want to tighten up. So there's nothing far more dangerous than going to bed at night and having a flash flood. And what kills most people is drowning in a flash flood. So, appreciate y'all's time.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I will say, just from sitting in on the small area plan, that is a really great committee. I mean, they've got some really dedicated people like Dee Dee serving on that, and they have really great discussions. I mean, they really get kind of down into the weeds really on issues, and it's just kind of heartwarming to see how the communities come together to make things better after such a horrible disaster.
We entertain a motion to adjourn.
We will.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.